Welcome everyone to this special webinar event in collaboration with Quicksilver Scientific and Fullscript. I'm Amy Regan from Fullscript, and I'm so glad that you joined us today. A few housekeeping notes. Please place all questions you have in the Q&A box for a chance for them to be answered at the end of the presentation. This webinar is being recorded, and the recording will be sent via email to all attendees and registrants, as well as available to watch at fullscript.com/webinars in a couple of days. There is a copy of the presentation slides in the handouts section for you to enjoy. It is my pleasure to introduce today's speaker. Dr. Matt Reddy has over 20 years of healthcare experience in naturopathic and functional medicine. Dr. Reddy earned a bachelor's degree in biology from the University of Colorado with an emphasis on chemistry and biochemistry. He went on to naturopathic medicinal school at the National University of Natural Medicine in Portland, Oregon, where he focused on complex digestive issues, environmental toxicity, and immune system dysregulation. He was a professor of foundational sciences at Southwest Acupuncture College in Colorado and has a thriving naturopathic and functional medicine practice, Reddy Natural Medicine, since 2002. Dr. Reddy has been partnering with Quicksilver Scientific as a clinical and educational consultant since 2014. Dr. Reddy, welcome.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Happy to be here. All right. So we are going to be diving right in here, I guess. So thanks everybody for joining us. We're going to be talking today about the Quicksilver detox difference. And my hope as you leave this is that you really have an idea of how to create protocols for detoxification that will really work for your patients. I want to cover a few different topics in the next 45 minutes or so. I want to briefly look at what toxicity is. Then I want to spend a little bit of time on the principles or the mechanisms, of detoxification. We're going to look at the Quicksilver Scientific detox principles and the framework to kind of think through detoxification. And then I'm going to leave you with a few cases just to kind of highlight how you can utilize these principles. So let's look then at toxicity. So, when we talk about toxicity, I think we have to understand two very important pieces. Number one, that we have to have some sort of exposure. I think everyone already probably understands that, whether it's going to be these different chemicals in our food, whether it's heavy metals, the things that we spray on our mattresses, flame retardants and things. We've got some level of exposure to these toxins that we need to eliminate. But the burden actually then also builds when that exposure exceeds our body's ability to manage the exposure. So the biotransformational capacity that all of our cells have is exceeded by this toxin exposure. And that's really what's going to lead to the symptoms and the toxic burden that we all can experience. And symptoms really are challenging to figure out from this sometimes because it mimics so many things. You're going to have mitochondrial issues, immune dysregulation, a lot of neurologic symptoms can occur. It can even lead to cardiovascular issues, GI issues. And then one I think that we're really starting to see more and more these days is the disruption of our endocrine system. So we've got to address both issues when we're talking about a successful detoxification program. We have to identify the toxin exposure, figure out what it is, that source. We need to minimize or eliminate that source. But then we also need to, at the same time, increase the ability of the body's ability to transform, process, and then eliminate those toxins. So that's really what we're going to be focusing on here today, is our body's ability to transform, process, and eliminate these toxins. So let's look at how our bodies are designed to manage exposure to these toxins. So a lot of this you may be familiar with, but my goal here is to link everything together in a step-by-step way so that you can think through this very easily. So we know that there are really three broad phases of detoxification. We've gotten phase 1, which is activation, phase 2, which is conjugation or mobilization, and then phase 3 is the filtration, transport, and excretion. When I was in school and when I just gotten out of school, we didn't really have a full understanding of all three of these phases. We were really just starting to understand phase 1 and phase 2. And so a lot of the detoxification protocols that were originally created were very heavy on the understanding of phase 1 and phase 2. Again, very important, but you need to link it then with phase 3. And I think that is really where some of Quicksilver's protocols really shine. And I think you'll get the most benefit. So all three need to be synced up together. So let's look at each one of those phases and kind of what's involved. So phase 1 is the activation phase. And so this is really an oxidative process where it's using the cytochrome P450 system, and it's going to prepare toxins for conjugation. Now, not all toxins require phase 1. So for example, heavy metals like mercury or cadmium really don't need phase 1. They are ready to go right into phase 2, but other toxins are not ready to go through phase 2. So they need to be activated. And really what we're talking about here is taking a toxin and making it a little bit more toxic, creating this free radical aspect of the toxin. And so that we can then move it through phase 2, which is conjugation. And here is where these toxins become more water soluble. They become more recognizable by the various transporters, so they can actually be moved out of the cell. This is where we use our glutathione, for example. We can also sulfate things or sulfation as part of conjugation. Glycine is used, other amino acids, taurine, methylation. This is all part of the conjugation phase 2 process. When we have reduced activity of phase 2, which can be seen very easily in really toxic people, you start not being able to take these highly reactive free radical toxins from phase 1, and they're stuck. They're not able to fully move through the entire process. So we really need to upregulate a lot of phase 2 when we generate these free radicals. And then that leads us to phase 3, the filtration and transportation part of our detoxification system. So we're using various transport proteins here, the MRPs, the OATs, the MOANTs. These are organic ion transporters that are within the membranes of cells that move these toxins out. And we have a lot of these, the main place we see these is going to be in our liver, but they can be in other cells as well. Kidneys have quite a few, so do the intestines. And the way to think about these, this aspect is these transporters deliver and carry these toxins away from the cells. So if we look at it in a picture, for those of you who are visual learners, we've got here our cell membrane. And within the cell, we're going to have phase 1 and phase 2. So the oxidative activation, and then moving through phase 2 with the conjugation, when then we can carry the toxin out through the liver, through the other transporters, into the small intestine, where it can be moved through the stool. There are other toxins that are moved through the kidneys and out through the urine. So all of these phases need to be synced up. We can also think about it in the microcosm, so more of a cellular function being phase 1 and phase 2, and then more of the macrocosm, which is going to be moving things through the liver and through the kidneys. So when we understand all three of those different phases, then we can work on using various nutraceuticals, herbs, etc., to enhance these processes. And so this is where at Quicksilver, we've developed our principles of detoxification. And there's 4 main principles of detoxification. We're going to have a push principle. And there's 2 aspects of that we'll cover here in just a minute in more detail. We've got our catch principle. We also have a membranes, and then the remove obstacles principle. So let's look at each one of these 4 principles in more detail and give you an idea of how to interact with each one of these. So principle number 1, the push principle. And specifically, we're going to be focusing on the drainage part here. So the drainage is, if we look back to our drawing of the microcosm and macrocosm, the drainage principle is really focusing more on the level of the macrocosm. So we're going to be using things that are going to support the movement of the toxins from the liver. Specifically, we're talking about bile flow here. And we're also focusing on the kidneys and the ability of the kidneys to mobilize toxins into the urine. We're also talking about circulation really as well. So you'll see things here that actively increase our body's ability to circulate the blood and move the blood. So once we have these aspects supported in the drainage working, that's really where we're going to go next then, in looking at more of the inside the cell aspects. But let's focus first here on the ability of moving toxins in the drainage piece, opening up these pathways out of our body. And we're going to zoom in then specifically into part of the liver here. This is going to be a hepatocyte. And the hepatocytes on one side are going to be fed by blood. So the blood's going to be carrying toxins into the liver cell. It's going to be bringing them to the liver. Those toxins are going to be moved into the liver, and they're going to move out then through the bile. So let's not focus too much on some of the cellular functions. Let's focus more here on phase 3 with the bile and the bile canaliculi, which is what's carrying the bile that the cell is making away. And the point here, and we're going to come back to this slide in just a minute, but the point here is that we have this motion through, this directionality from the blood through the liver, and then primarily draining out the other side with the bile. What we see happen for many patients is that the hepatocyte is not able to drain properly. So if we look here at the bile canaliculi, you're going to see that these transporters here, red was probably not the best choice, I apologize. You'll see that the transporters here are actually not all inside the membrane of the cell. We actually pull away some of these transporters and protect them, because the toxin buildup within the hepatocyte can damage them. So we wall those off, and we hope that the cell is going to survive, and we're going to move the toxins back. Actually, what happens is you start having these toxins move back out of the cell into the blood, because the drainage aspect from the cell is not working properly. So you preserve the cell, hopefully, by keeping these toxins out, but as a result, people don't clear these toxins, and they stay in the blood. So we have, instead of this directionality moving from left to right, from the blood all the way through into the bile, we actually have it kicking back into the blood, and you're not clearing these toxins. So these are just showing that these transporters that should be moving toxins in now switch and move toxins away from the cell. The kidneys have very similar transporters. So when we're talking about drainage, we also need to support the microtubule, the tubular function, within the kidneys as well. So the transporters that we saw in the liver are also inside the kidneys as well. And we also have to talk about lymph when we're talking about drainage. So lymph is also circulating these toxins around. moving them through and out of the body as well. So we need to keep the lymphatic flow going, and bile flow and lymph are very closely related in how they move toxins. So when we look at things that can support the drainage, we're going to be focused on, like I said before, moving bile and creating more bile. And in herbal medicine, that's going to be cholagogue herbs or bitter herbs. So for example, you've got dandelion, gentian, myrrh, solidago. These are all herbs traditionally used to, number one, stimulate the creation of bile, and number two, transport bile out, move it, cholagogues. We can also want things that are going to support the kidneys. These are going to be things like astragalus, ferulic acid, juniper, dandelion as well. All help with the drainage and the diuretic and the movement through the kidneys. And then, we're talking about blood flow here too, right? We're carrying these toxins. Things have to be moving. And this is where we can use things like danshen or hawthorn, ginkgo, all things that can improve circulation, of the blood. So really, this is our drainage protocol. In Quicksilver has products that have these herbs in it, like our Bitter X formula is these 4 herbs. We have a kidney care product, which has these nutrients in it, these herbs in it as well. And then all kinds of different circulatory products, like our performance cardio, for example, would have these herbs in it. So the other piece in the push then is going to be our cellular support. So cellular push is going to be focused more here in the in the cellular phase 1 and phase 2 detoxification here. And then we're going to link that then to the drainage. So not only do you want to think of things that are going to upregulate the inside, the phase 1 and phase 2, that has to be coupled together then with the drainage. And so here's our hepatocyte picture again. So we again talk about our movement from the blood through the cell of the toxins into the bile. And if you look here at the inside of the cell, we've got phase 1, taking a toxin, making it more active, making it red, you'll see. Here's our red toxin right there. That's going to be then conjugated here and then moved out into the bile through the transporters. NRF2 is what turns on all of these phase 1 and phase 2 enzymes. That's a genetic transcription factor that's going to increase their function. And not only do we have activation of phase 1 and phase 2, we're bringing in phosphatidylcholine, which is going to fluidize the bile and really make sure that everything is flowing out. And you'll notice here that all of the transporters are nicely embedded, transporting these toxins out of the cell into the bile. And there's our directionality, so from left to right. So what do we want to use to increase phase 1 and phase 2 and link it together with the drainage? Well, we're going to want to use things that are going to, number one, stimulate the bile flow, like we talked about before. We've got our bitter herbs we talked about earlier. We've got our phosphatidylcholine, which is going to fluidize the bile. We can also then use things that are going to support the mast cell activation that can happen during detoxification, as well as any kind of immune dysregulation. So these are going to be things like DIM and quercetin and luteolin. And then we can also then upregulate that NRF2. Again, remember, that's the cellular transcription factor that's going to turn on phase 1 and phase 2. So we're going to use DIM and quercetin, luteolin, and an R-lipoic acid is a powerful NRF2 upregulator. So all of these together are going to really going to sync up phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3 for detoxification. And this is all a part of Quicksilver Scientific's liver sauce formula, which will do everything that we've just talked about. It's a really amazing formula for that. We can also add glutathiones. Remember, glutathione is a major part of that phase 2, the conjugation. And the part of the problem with toxicity is that people are often very low in glutathione or burn through it very quickly and can't regenerate it fast enough to keep the toxic, load moving through, particularly when there's heavy metals going on, but it can be other toxins as well. And so adding in extra glutathione can be extremely helpful. And you really need to have the reduced liposomal glutathione for that. So here is just a summary of everything that we talked about with our cellular function. We've got NRF2 upregulators like R-lipoic acid, luteolin, and DIM. AMPK, we're not going to cover that too much today, but that's an aspect of detoxification that happens when you're in a more fasted state, when the cell is actually going through autophagy and clearing away old mitochondria and toxins that way. So we can upregulate NRF2. That's all part of a cellular push concept. And then glutathione builders using things like liposomal glutathione. You can also use NAC and other things that can build glutathione. So just a couple of papers here as well, looking at aspects of detoxification using DIM, using AMPK activation as well. All right, so that's our push, our push principle. So supporting both the drainage and supporting the cellular aspects of detoxification. So our second principle is the catch principle. So this is going to be toxin binding and excretion. So what we're focusing on here then is going to be our intestinal clearance of these toxins. So as we move these toxins out of the cell through the liver into the GI system, we don't want to reabsorb these toxins. We want to make sure they are bound up properly so they can be carried out of the body. And that's where a good binding principle needs to be addressed. And so there's a lot of different binders out there, and different binders have different jobs as far as their ability and their affinity for different toxins. So we can use things like charcoal. We can use things like bentonite clay, zeolite, functionalized silica. This is a product Quicksilver uses called IMD, which is basically a silica with all these what are called thiol functional groups. And if we look here at, this is a drawing of silica, and all around it here are these thiols, these sulfur functional groups. Those are metal binders like mercury and cadmium. Very good binding of heavy metals with functionalized silica or IMD. We can also have chitosan. Chitosan is a very great binder to mycotoxins. So, really having something that has as many of these binding agents available. Quicksilver has the ultra binder, which has all of these added to it. And each one, and it's important because different toxins have different affinities. So you want the biggest, most broad binder as you possibly can. That one's pretty straightforward, bind the toxins. And so then our third principle is membranes. Now, membranes, were really made famous with Bruce Lipton's work, talking about the communication between this inside the cell and the outside of the cell through the cellular membrane. And remember, membranes extend they're not only outside of the cell, but they also extend into the cell with the organelles. So all the organelles, from our mitochondria to the endoplasmic reticulum, the membrane around the nucleus, all have very similar properties. They're basically built by phosphatidylcholine, these phospholipids. And their role is in transport and movement in and out of the cell, as well as communication between the outside and the inside. So we really need strong, healthy membranes. And We know that a lot of different toxins, for example, like cadmium, very damaging to cellular membranes. And when you lose that integrity of the cells, when you lose the integrity of the membranes, you lose a lot of the communication. So supporting that is extremely important. And if we go back to our hepatocyte, I want to bring your attention. I'm going to switch colors here. We can use a little brighter one here. I want to bring your attention to phosphatidylcholine. So not only does phosphatidylcholine build the membranes, but it's a major ingredient in the bile. So when we're talking about drainage, when we're talking about coupling phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3, we need phosphatidylcholine in that as well. And that's all going to be, is important to support here. So when we're talking about other aspects of membranes, we talked already here about phosphatidylcholine. We can look at astaxanthin as another really important nutrient, very great antioxidant. Astaxanthin is that beautiful red pigment we see found in a lot of in some various seaweeds. Very, very useful at building cell membranes. Vitamin E, strong antioxidant for cell membranes. And then omega-3 fatty acids are also important here too. Membrane Mend is the Quicksilver product that has all of these added to it. And you can use these individually as well. Pure PC is also available, which is just phosphatidylcholine. And there's just some drawings here showing the transport and movement of in and out of the cells. So healthy cell membranes mean healthy cells. All right, and that leads us to our fourth principle, removing obstacles. So this is actually where a lot of the art, I think, of detoxification is really going to come in, because different people have different obstacles that are in the way of them detoxing. So you can do all of the three things that we just talked about with the push and the catch and helping with membranes. But if these obstacles are present, it's going to be a much harder process to deliver the results that you want. So let's look at the first of these obstacles, and these are microbial obstacles, active and latent infections. So when we have a chronic infection, that's going to generate chronic inflammation, and the chronic inflammation depresses detoxification, leading to more toxicity. When you have more toxicity, now you go and you've actually dysregulated the immune system. You've switched over from a more a balanced Th1 to Th2 communication, and now you've increased the Th2, which means you're not getting on top of the infection and clearing it. So there's an immune dysfunction. You've got this chronic infection, chronic inflammation, and the cycle continues. And it can be a very challenging situation that we find ourselves in. So these are going to be your patients with with Lyme. They could have gut infections, any kind of a parasitic type issue. Anything that's not getting fully resolved can lead to very challenging detoxification. Here's a couple of papers talking about the direct relationship between some viruses like RSV and how it downregulates the NRF2. So you've actually slowed down that cellular detoxification. Here's an enterovirus that does the same thing in this paper. So what do we use then to improve our body's ability to handle these infections? Well, all types of herbs are used to do this. For example, artemisinin. Artemisinin is really great at getting rid of parasitic infections. It's been shown to improve the balance in GI infections as well. So also Japanese knotwood can be used. For example, or cat's claw. Cat's claw is one of my favorite ones for viral issues. If you've got like Epstein-Barr, some of these latent viruses, cat's claw can be very useful. Cryptolepis, wonderful herb in the tick-borne illness space. So using cryptolepis. And then Quicksilver does have a product, our Crypto Comax has these added together, all these together in order to support you in clearing away some of these latent infections. Another obstacle that people have, and this is that inflammation that I showed you. Inflammation could be from an infection, but it could be from something else. Maybe it could be from a traumatic brain injury. It could also be from a food poisoning type of a thing, maybe toxin in a food, whether it's maybe not necessarily bacterial, but other things as well. This is a paper we talked about all the time here at Quicksilver, which really demonstrates this problem that we tend to have with various toxic agents. And so the title of this paper is Concurrent Inflammation is a determinant of the susceptibility to toxicity from these xenobiotic agents. So basically, if we break this down, we can say, okay, now we have a toxic agent here with that's a xenobiotic agent. How toxic is it is a direct result of how much inflammation somebody has. So the more inflammation people have, they're more susceptible to the toxicity from that xenobiotic agent. And so an example of a xenobiotic agent is going to be LPS, or lipopolysaccharide, coming from gram-negative bacteria. And so what this graph is showing is these times of increased susceptibility from LPS. And so if you have a GI disturbance or have increased alcohol, all of that, these types of exposures are going to increase our susceptibility to LPS. And so we really need to work with, number one, clearing away the LPS in this case, right? But we also need to work with the concurrent inflammation as well. And so how do we calm the system? How do we reduce inflammation? And this is where we're going to use things like curcumin, boswellia. You can use full and broad spectrum hemp with the CBD and the various phytocannabinoids. GABA and L-theanine, wonderful for calming the brain and the overactive inflammation in the brain. Certain herbs like skullcap or passion flower, chamomile, very useful as well, helping people sleep if needed. That can help reduce inflammation. Vitamin C, DIM, quercetin, luteolin, all have an effect in calming the inflammatory process. And our final remove obstacle is going to be energy creation, or low energy. So improving energy creation. So this is a paper that looked at how toxic methyl mercury was these are in actually these C. elegans, which are these little worms that they were studying. But basically they measured the amount of NAD, so the mitochondrial output of these C. elegans, and when they didn't have any mercury, so this is showing the mercury here, or no, excuse me, they were not treated with NAD and mercury. And as the mercury levels went up, you'll see the level of mercury go up. You'll see that the mitochondrial function decreased dramatically. But when they gave them NAD, the mitochondrial function actually stabilized. And we see the same thing here. The actual number of mitochondria, a very similar thing happened. So the more NAD that they had, in the second aspect of the study, the more mitochondria they actually retained. The mercury did not damage their mitochondria as much when they actually had NAD available. And on the right here, they're showing how the actual NAD levels that were measured when they didn't have NAD given to them, their NAD levels just dropped, as you would expect. But when they did have NAD given to them, they actually made more NAD. So that's very useful to know. When we actually have a toxic state, and we keep the mitochondria functioning, and we keep providing the building blocks that can allow the function, it can build more on its own and can stay on top of things much more readily instead of just getting depleted. And so here, this is showing mitochondria that's functioning properly here on the left, and then this is showing a mitochondria that's getting damaged on the right and not able to generate the ATP. And so here's what we're talking about is NAD creation, mitochondrial function. So we can use things like NMN, we can use CoQ10, PQQ, resveratrol. We can use various vitamin compounds like a multivitamin or B complex. And we can also use different herbs, adrenal herbs, etc. Minerals are needed here as well. So very quickly, I just want to address the importance of bioavailability. So everything that we've just talked about really works best if you can actually get it into the body, right? And in the context of supplements, you know, some of the delivery systems that we use, the traditional things of capsules and powders and even tinctures and tablets really are limited in their ability to get absorbed. And some things are much easier to absorb than others. You know, for example, vitamin C, you might be able to absorb a little bit easier, but glutathione, you can't really absorb at all. Or something like curcumin, very, very challenging to absorb. And so, you know, especially if you've got patients with GI issues, if you've got a lot of gut inflammation, you're really limiting your absorption. So that's why if we can deliver it in a way that bypasses our gut and delivers these compounds directly into the blood supply, we actually can get the results that we're looking for. And this is really where the Quicksilver delivery system comes in with our liposomes and our nanoemulsions. So a liposome is slightly different than a nanoemulsion. A liposome is going to be a lipid bilayer. So what we're showing you here is, this is B here, this is a liposome. You've got a lipid bilayer, a phospholipid bilayer, and inside that bilayer is a water core where we've dissolved things like glutathione or vitamin C, water-soluble compounds. If we're talking about a nanoemulsion, we're talking about a single layer of phospholipids, and inside that is going to be fat-soluble compounds like vitamin D and CBDs. And a lot of the herbs as well, the compounds found in various herbal extractions are going to be fat soluble. So you're going to use a nanoemulsion here. So what Quicksilver does then is we make these nanoemulsions in liposomes, and we make them very small. We actually make them nano-sized. Now, nano-sized particles are really nothing to fear. They're just means really small. And they're going to get absorbed directly into the mucous membranes of the mouth right into the blood supply. And that's because they are made from, Quicksilver makes them extremely small. And so in order for you to actually absorb them through the oral cavity, they need to be small unilamellar particles or vesicles, and they need to be under 100 nanometers in size. If they're not under 100 nanometers in size, they're not going to get absorbed through the oral cavity and the upper part of the GI. They're going to go into the gut and have to get absorbed pretty much the way any kind of supplement, powder or tincture or tablet would. So you want to make these particles small, and that's really the brilliance of the chemistry that Quicksilver provides. So it's this balance between these phospholipids, various emulsifiers, and different ingredients that creates this very stable, these stable products. And you can tell the size very easily just by looking. And so what we see here are going to be five different CBD products, and they're all marketed as liposomal products. But what I want to point your attention to is that the Quicksilver one, if you'll notice, is here, this one on the far right. You can see directly through the product here. It's transparent, so you can see the bottle shot through the product. If you look at these other products, they're all going to be cloudy and thick, And that's because the particles are larger than the wavelengths of light. So the light is reflecting back as a cloudy product. If it goes right through, you're going to see through it. So a quick way to tell if it's under 100 nanometers in size is if you can see through it. And this graph is just demonstrating the same thing as far as absorption goes. The smaller the particle, which is going from left to right here, the higher the absorption of the compounds. And we measure, not only can you look at it, and see that it's transparent, but we actually have laser sizers at Quicksilver. So here's our distribution. This is our glutathione here. And you can see the distribution in nanometers. And you want to see these peaks here be under 100. And that's the distribution, very tight distribution, versus our competitors here. You'll see a much wider distribution. And starting really small, or the smallest is going to be, around 50. They can go all the way up past 1,000 nanometers with a mean here going to be of 300. So that's going to be your cloudier products and not absorbable. And the reason we want these products to be so absorbable is because we want to get them in the body quickly and activate things all together. We don't want to wait for one thing to get absorbed easily while another thing's going to take 2 or 3 hours to get absorbed and get to therapeutic doses. And what we call that is biosynchronous activation, which is really the end result of these compounds all being delivered at the same time. You're activating everything all together. And that's going to mobilize the bile flow, the push part with the NRF2 upregulation. It's going to support the membranes, everything happening all at once so you can deliver what you need quickly and effectively. So here's just a breakdown of the things we talked about in one document from our push principle, catch, membranes, and removing obstacles, and the various things that can support them. So let's look really quickly here at a couple of case examples, and then we'll get to some of your questions. So the first example here is going to be a 52-year-old male who with high blood pressure, overweight, and having anxiety. And so in order to really improve this particular patient, we focused a lot on his circulation due to the hypertension. And then in the cellular push, and so that's going to be the drainage piece. In the cellular push part, because of the weight issue, I wanted to support him with the AMPK. So we supported his blood sugar regulation. We supported his autophagy, as well as upregulating some of the detoxification pathways with the NRF2 upregulation that some of these same compounds deliver. And we added in a catch with the ultra binder, which is the charcoal and clay and zeolite. And then for the anxiety and removing the inflammation, because remember, you can't really detox well if you don't calm down the brain and get the anxiety under control. And so that's where we used a broad spectrum, or excuse me, a full spectrum CBD product, a hemp CBD formula. Had another woman who had weight gain, fatigue, and a lot of brain fog. And so we did our liver sauce, which is really going to be those bitter herbs, as well as the NRF2 upregulators here. And then we did the ultra binder. So this is our push catch liver detox. So our liver sauce focuses here. Our ultra binder focuses here. We added in some extra glutathione for her. She did have a parasite that we identified, so got her on some artemisinin. And then for her energy, started her on our NAD platinum product, which has got the NMN, the CoQ10 resveratrol PQQ, as well as the B complex. This was a mold patient. I know a lot of you probably work with mold patients. So working in the Quicksilver world with mold, Again, you're going to see we supported both aspects of drainage and cellular push. So we've got the liver sauce, the bitters, and the NRF2 upregulators. We added in the kidney support, our kidney care, really make sure the kidneys were draining properly. We put in the glutathione, and we did the ultra binder. So we've got the charcoal, the chitosan, definitely for the mold, the mycotoxin binding, as well as the charcoal. We'll do that as well. Really wanted to get in the membrane support here as well. So we've got our membrane mend, which is all of these support here. We had the NAD platinum with the low energy, because with mold, there's definitely a mitochondrial impairment going on. So we needed to get that going. And then we added in some adaptogen herbs to keep the adrenals strong as well. And then our last case here, this was an autism case. So neuroinflammation case, with autistic patients, that's really the biggest drivers is just brain is on fire, and they have very, very backed up detoxification channels here. So here you can see support with the drainage and the cellular push with our liver sauce. We've got our ultra binder. And then this particular formula is, we have one called CBD Synergies AX, which is a combination of the full spectrum CBD along with GABA and these herbs. Wonderful for calming the brain and really very useful in autistic cases as well. All right, I feel like I cruised through that really fast, but really wanted to cover all of that. So my hope here is that everyone really has a good sense then of those four different principles. And if you can put all those together, you're going to have a successful detoxification. So thank you, guys.
Wow, wow, wow. Thank you so much, Dr. Reddy. Oh my goodness. So much to absorb.
Yeah, it's a lot. So
excellent. Yeah. Anyone with questions, please put them in the Q&A box, and we can see if we have time to answer them. First off, Coney is asking, is liver sauce enough for someone without a gallbladder?
Yeah, great question. So remember, the gallbladder is the storage of bile. The liver is what makes the bile. So when someone loses their gallbladder, it's a really good indicator that they are not making very good quality bile. And so that builds up over time, and then they tend to lose their gallbladder, the creation of stones and obstruction and that kind of thing. So liver sauce will definitely be useful in the creation and the movement of bile because of those bitter herbs and the phosphatidylcholine that's in there. So yes, absolutely can be used in patients without a gallbladder, but you probably want to go a little slower at first, make sure that they're able to, they just don't have that store of bile anymore, right? Your bile's just dripping into the intestine kind of consistently without that store in the gallbladder. So everything's going to be a little slower, I guess is my point there. So
Rachel is wondering, what would have you choose to support with NAC instead of glutathione? Do you ever use both at the same time?
I rarely use NAC because of Quicksilver's liposomal glutathione. The reason in the past that was really recommended was because you can't give someone glutathione in a capsule. You digest it, you break it apart. I mean, glutathione is only 3 amino acids. And NAC is going to be one of those amino acids, the cysteine. So you will build a glutathione from NAC. It's useful in that context. But in really chronically ill people, why not just give them straight glutathione, minimize their need to synthesize it on their own, provide it right to them. And since it is in a liposomal delivery, and it's going to actually get absorbed as glutathione and will be able to be utilized that way. So, I would say, just to answer that question, a lot of toxicity, chronic issues, go right to liposomal glutathione. If you have someone you're generally pretty healthy and you just want to support kind of their own ability to create it, you could use some NAC.
Excellent. Robbie is wondering, how long do the liposomal products last once opened?
So yeah, great question. They aren't, they will eventually, degrade a bit. Particularly we're just talking about glutathione. Glutathione really should be used within a month of opening it. Other products, you're probably wanting them to be used definitely within a couple of months, just to get optimal potency from them. I mean, it's likely that they'll be generally stable for a while, but we can't guarantee, potency. I mean, there is some of the products we do have expiration dates. Some of them are newer, so we actually haven't established some of that yet, and they're working on building that data, which takes a little bit of time. They're not fragile enough that they're going to break down within a week or even a month after opening them generally. But if you really want to get the optimal use of them, use them, regularly, fairly quickly. Yeah.
Excellent. Lindsay is wondering, what's good for a lead detox specifically?
Yeah. So lead's very slow to come out. So you're still supporting everything that we talked about, with, opening up those pathways, moving, upregulating those enzymes. Kidneys really need support with lead. And, we use our liposomal EDTA. So EDTA is going to be the binder for lead. It's a very specific binder, and you're going to hold on to it and clear it out. But it will clear it out really through the kidneys. So if you're using EDTA specifically for lead, make sure that you have the kidney support on board as well.
Excellent. Carly is wondering, what are your thoughts on using the bitter X in addition to the bitters already in the liver sauce? Are there additional bitters necessary in cases? And if so, which ones?
Yeah, so that's a good, that's right, because the bitter X is the same herbs that are in liver sauce. Remember, there's no NRF2 upregulation with, just the bitters. The people that are really nauseous or have some really slow digestive function, extra bitters can be extremely beneficial there. And you can definitely use them together. The liver sauce is usually used a couple of times a day, and you could intersperse bitter X kind of other times. And I found it beneficial kind of ongoingly, people just have a little bit of bitters, maybe 1 or 2 pumps, maybe up to 4 in between their doses of the liver sauce if needed. So yeah, you can definitely use them together. You don't have to, but some people might find help from that.
Excellent.
Yeah.
How do you recommend tailoring protocols for really sensitive patients?
So really sensitive people need a lot of the drainage support. So that first principle that I talked about, opening up those pathways, is really needed. So you don't really want to push a lot of that NRF2 movement right away with those really sensitive people. One of the things I think where we ran into problems, especially in the past with detoxification protocols, was upregulating a lot of these processes cellularly, and there wasn't any support for getting them moving out. And so people felt terrible, and we talked about that being Herx reactions or different things like that. And I think it was often just overwhelm of our drainage pathways. And so sensitive people, you really just want to start slow. You want to get the drainage pathways open first. That's where the bitter X would come in, where the kidney care would come in. You might even just use some extra vitamin C in those cases. We have a protocol called the pre-tox protocol, which is designed for these sensitive people to really get the drainage pathways open first. and then move them into more of the push catch protocol, where you do stimulate more focused detoxification. And the other thing that you can do in really sensitive people is go just a little slower. You may not do, if you might like to do, you might recommend like 2 teaspoons a day of everything. Maybe you just do on 1 or even a half, you can just go a little bit slower. And I don't want people to be afraid of like liver sauce or NRF2 upregulation. You don't have to be, but in really sensitive people, maybe wait a month or 2 before you bring in a lot of that.
Let's see here. Is your approach to mercury detox the same as the lead detox you just mentioned? Are you using EDTA as well?
So lead will bind to EDTA well, but mercury really doesn't have a huge affinity for EDTA, and so with binding mercury, you're really using the IMD, or that functionalized silica product I was talking about, because mercury is very reactive to thiols. Thiols are the sulfur-containing functional groups, and so you need that in available to bind mercury. So when you're doing a push, mercury is going to be coming through into the bile. It's going to be bound to glutathione, conjugated to glutathione, into the gut, and then it can bind right there to the IMD, and then that will hold on to it and clear it out. So you really don't need to do the drastic ketylation protocols and other things like that when you understand how to link up these parts of detoxification, and especially the binder piece with this thiol binding that we can do to mercury.
Excellent. And how long do you use the detox products for?
Timing is really tricky because everybody needs different amounts. And I think one thing I would say to that is, remember, our bodies are always doing some level of detoxification. And there's a general need to support kind of continuous everyday detox. And then there's chunks of time where we can really focus on a detox and like do a detox, kind of a thing. And those sorts of chunks of time, I think, are going to be between anywhere from 30 to maybe 90 days, depending on what's going on, sometimes longer. But I think if we can, definitely focus initially on a 30 to 60 day kind of detox and then run with certain things ongoingly, that's really where we get the most lasting effects for our patients. So things like, our advanced push catch protocol for a month or 2, and then moving them more into just maybe a little bit of bitters and, PC or something, just to, as an example, just to kind of keep things moving along ongoingly. Because it's a toxic world we live in. We have to be able to manage these things on an ongoing basis.
And how do you approach detox with an elevated liver function test?
So there's a reason the liver enzymes are elevated. Something's inflaming the liver, something's, impeding its function. So depending on how significant the liver inflammation is, you may need to first calm that down. My go-to for that would be milk thistle and probably pure PC or membrane mend, something just to really heal the liver, and then start moving and getting the bile moving. You just don't want to overwhelm our already inflamed liver. You need to calm that down first, but there's a reason it got inflamed in the first place. Again, remember, detoxing protocols have to eliminate the source of the toxin first, and then we have to upregulate the mechanism. So if it's something like too much alcohol, well, you got to stop drinking, obviously, right? And you got to then heal the liver, or identify the source, remove the source, and then heal the liver, and then go from there.
Excellent. All right, let's do one more question. Gordon is wondering, with chronic patients, do you start the whole protocol at once, or do you layer them in to monitor progress and then start them all at once?
Yeah, that's going to really be patient by patient, but really sensitive people, yeah, you may layer things in one at a time, but Dr. Shade always says there's two pitfalls that people have in doing detoxification. Number one is going too fast, too soon, but the other is going too slow for too long. And so if you're starting with, one product and then doing that for a week and then doing another one for a week, another one, you end up just taking forever, and you really don't need to do that. I mean, we have tried to create our protocols in a way that gradually increases the dosing so you can see what happens, and you can always reduce the amount that you're doing as well. So whether it's like a teaspoon, maybe you do a half, but you're still using everything all together, and then you're building from there. So, it's easy to be too conservative and too slow. I think we just don't want to do that. So don't be afraid of it, but be wise and, listen to your patients. But I guess I wouldn't still go one at a time if I don't think you need to.
Excellent. Well, great advice. Well, I want to say thank you so much to everyone who attended today. And thank you also to Dr. Reddy for this great presentation. Everyone take a look out in their email with a link to view this recording, as well as a special offer from Quicksilver Scientific over the next couple of days. Anyone who has any additional questions can send them over to me at amy.regan, R-E-G-A-N, @fullscript.com. I hope everyone enjoyed the presentation. And any final thoughts for us, Dr. Reddy? Not to put you on the spot.
No, I don't think so. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. It's fun to do these. And I guess I could say I'm available through Quicksilver for consultations on any kind of product, protocols, questions with patients, things like that. So if that is something you're interested in, you can reach out to Quicksilver and get on my schedule for that. So
excellent. Thank you so much, everyone.
Right.
Have a great
Thanks,
afternoon.
everyone.
Bye.